so much for joining How to Win an UnAward, which is the first of its kind, I think, in terms of a webinar when we've got a whole mixture of people. And so, yeah, I was saying earlier, JP had this idea about let's do a webinar at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And I thought, initially, I thought that sounds like the absolute worst time to run a webinar, but let's try it. And JP was right and I was wrong, because we're already 30 strong. So thanks so much to everybody that's joined. Yeah, we are recording the session just for those that I suppose have got more important things to do with their lives than us 30. But thanks so much for joining. And we thought we'd have half an hour, 45 minutes together, very informal, just having a chat. We'll pick the brains. We've got some winners of UnAwards on the call. We've got many people that have entered and been shortlisted in the past. We've got judges on the call. We've got people that have won awards, because there are other awards as well, not just the UnAwards apparently, but there are people that have won other awards. So what we really wanted to do is pool everybody's kind of collective creative ideas, thoughts, lessons learned, top tips, what to do, what not to do. And so I've got plenty of questions, but really keen to get your questions as well. So we thought we'd have a nice little chat, and yeah. So I thought what it might be worth doing to kick off first. We've got a couple of, so I might slip up here because I'm speaking and looking at the attendee list at the same time. So we may have more winners and more judges than I think. So all the better for that. But I think we've certainly got a couple of previous winners, and we've got Louisa Dean, who's sick of seeing me because this is twice this week now, isn't it? And I've made her come to two things, so I think she's quite annoyed with me. And we've got Rob McCleary, who's also a previous winner as well. So hi to Louisa and Rob. If you've won an UnAward or you've been shortlisted before, do drop it into the chat. We're going to do questions and we'll get people to raise their hands. So there's some kind of order to things, rather than just a bun fight free for all. But if you've got any questions, any thoughts, anything you want to share, put it into the chat as well. But equally, we want to hear from you as well. So at the appropriate time, if you can raise your hand and you can ask questions of any of the judges, any of the previous winners, or anybody else on the call, because we've got a call full of very creative people, haven't we? So I prepared a little bit, because it's best to prepare a little bit, isn't it? I've found in life. But I suppose really, should we kick off with a couple of the previous winners to tell us a little bit about, I suppose, what made you do it in the first place? Because let's be honest, you're all incredibly busy. You've all got 50 things on the to-do list, and submitting an award entry is the kind of thing that always ends up being nudged to the bottom, or to next week and next week. Now, the UnAwards close on the 30th, so it's 2 weeks on Monday. And famously, they're never extended, and I can confirm they won't be extended this year, because I always get on the final day messages from lots of people saying, are they going to be extended? And I always have to say, no. And then people are kind of, oh, bomb, right, okay, I'm going to have to pull a late one then. So they do close at midnight. And I think the record late entry, because I sit up and watch these things because I'm a very sad man, is 30 seconds before midnight is the latest valid entry. There have been a few that I think the latest one was 3 days afterwards. I mean, they've already gone to the judges at that point, so there literally is no point. So, yeah, but we thought really perhaps we'll start off with Louisa, and perhaps introduce yourself first. Although she's very famous these days, maybe a couple of people on the call might not know who Louisa is. And yeah, tell us who you are and a little bit of the background as to what led you to entering UnAwards.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Louisa Dean. I'm the Head of Communications at Reading Borough Council, but I'm previously known for being the Head of Comms at the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. And some of you may remember that a few famous people died there, the Queen and Prince Philip. So the reason we entered awards is because I can see my little comms superhero in the windows up here. So Jill Spur, who was working in my team, made me apply for another award. Which we won't mention, because she said, you've done some amazing work and you need to be recognised for what you've delivered and what we've done as a comms team. And that was for Prince Philip's funeral. And I just thought we were doing our job. So we entered and we won. And then that sort of got the bug, and we entered for other awards and other categories that weren't just funerals. And we have also been recognised and shortlisted and won. But the one that Darren takes the mickey out of, as I won 3 last year in UnAwards, but that was for the funeral of the Queen. And when I was doing that, I was also head of comms at the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead and Reading Borough Council, which is how I won Comms Professional. So I think for me, it's really worthwhile entering, because it makes you remember what you've done as a comms professional over the year and your team. It makes the organisation realise what you've done as a professional and a team. It gives your team a real boost, regardless of whether you're shortlisted or win. And it's a real success. Like when you do win or even shortlisted, you feel amazing. So I definitely recommend it. You don't just need a funeral. There are other things that happen in life. And, you know, one of the other people that's going to talk in a minute is Rob. And I just think what he did in his comms team is incredible. And, you know, he did need to be recognised and he did need to win that award. So that's why I did it. Do you want me to pass over to Rob now? Because I've given him a good...
Yeah, well, you teed it up really nicely. So yes, thank you, Louisa.
Off you go, Rob.
Thank you. My head will not get out the door now. What I would say, and that's very kind, and you know, I do appreciate it. It was the best thing that ever happened to me in my entire life, and I've got 2 kids, you know, and I love them very dearly. But this was up there, because it's the award. It's the UnAwards for me are exactly as I described. They are the most relaxed awards you can ever be part of. The whole philosophy of Darren and Comms 2.0 makes it. It's not corporate. It's not over the top. It's very relaxed. And so submitting for the award is one thing, but if you haven't attended the awards as well, they're just completely different to anything else you've ever been part of. And it was that relaxed approach that someone like me, I'm not really big on these kind of over the top, you know, really expensive awards. It's just not my style, you know, black tie and all that. So that was a big draw for me. And I've been to a few of these things over the years, and seeing other people win made me very jealous and bitter. So, you know, I decided to go for it. I've just today, obviously, because I'm, you know, planning this, you know, not my best thing. I thought I'll quickly have a look at the nomination that I wrote. And I remember saying at the UnAwards masterclass, and this is absolutely true, I wrote my submission on the final day in about 40 minutes. And I looked at the word count, and the total word count was 535 words, I think, in total. So but the reason why it won is because it was a year, 2 years, even 3 years in the making of the work that we had done to get to this point, and it just rolled off the tongue. I was able to, quite good. Just I haven't actually told you who I am, where I'm from. I'm from Gedling Borough Council, and I was I nominated us for the Small Team of the Year award. So, and in our award, I was able just to, you know, really simply say that we had a strategy. We aligned it with the council's objectives, and I had some, you know, really good data to show that we'd had a great, you know, year. So it doesn't have to be War and Peace. Mine wasn't. I can't write like that. My style was very, very informal. I mean, I think if I read it said the communication strategy was written for 2 reasons. Reason 1, my boss wanted one doing, and reason 2, I needed to become more strategic. And that was literally how I went in. So it just gives you an idea of my my writing style. So very laid back, and it just fitted with the awards. So hopefully that helps. It was such a great feeling to win. I literally danced down the aisle. So I recommend it if you've got that time to put the work in.
That's brilliant, Rob. And for those that were at the masterclass, we run a masterclass the following spring where all the winners come and present their winning work. And Rob's session was so, it was like a stand-up routine, to be honest. It was actually really entertaining. And thanks for the kind words, Rob. Although Rob's a fellow Brummie, I haven't paid him to say any of this.
No, not yet.
I mean, I would have done if I had to, but he was quite willing to do it. Yeah, no, that's brilliant, Robin. And there is something about the brevity, isn't there? I mean, because I always say, think about the judges, because the judges in some categories will have 30, 40 entries to go through. And that's a hell of a lot of reading and a lot to digest. And there is something about stripping it back, keeping it simple. You know, the judges will know this better than me, because I don't actually get to judge anything, which is fortunate for me. But there is something about, you know, just clear, simple, concise, nicely signposted. And I think one of the judging criterias for the awards is around creativity, and I think your creativity shines through, and I think that was probably a big part of why the judges chose you. And I think, Rob, your entire comms team were at the UnAwards, weren't they? Because it was both of you.
It was me and Nathan, except he's buggered off now and got a new promotion. He's got a new fancy job, so it's down to me now. So if anyone wants to come and join my wonderful team, keep an eye out for a job post on the website at some point.
It must have been that UnAward he won. It obviously.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, probably was. So yeah, it's two down to one now, but it's yeah. So well, that was the criteria. So
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic to hear. And you're saying that about the last day. I mean, I've said this before for those that haven't heard it, every single year, this is the 8th year of the UnAwards, 50% of the entries land in the last 48 hours. And I'm always just panicking. It's the only work thing I ever really worry about these days. And, you know, because you want it to be a success, you want lots of great entries. And I always get to about a week to go and I think, oh, the entries are down this year. And then I never like to take it for granted and assume, but true to form, comms people come good in the last 48 hours. And we do seem to love a deadline, don't we? But well, we'll talk to others about that. But what I would say is, start it sooner. Start it. Don't leave it to the last day, even though it really did work well for Rob. So is it true, Rob?
I'm a lot grayer than I was before this process. So yeah.
Yeah. Is it true that when you first won it, you took it home and put it up in the lounge? The award?
No, my awards are in the office now, but they are prime place. So anyone that has a Teams call with me will see it straight away. It takes pride of place in my office.
Fantastic. I love that. No, thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm sure people on the call will have questions for you in a sec, Rob. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I suppose just very quickly back to Louisa. Louisa, I think you said that obviously you've entered previous years as well, haven't you? But not won or not been shortlisted. And I suppose, what made you carry on after the years of failure?
Oh, thanks. Years of failure. That's a bit rude, isn't it? Determination, Darren. So in my masterclass, I entered in 2018, I think I talked about, for the royal wedding, but I didn't get anywhere near shortlisted. And I think I was a bit gutted about that, because I thought it was a national event. Why on earth haven't I been selected? But it was the clarity of the entry. So when I look back at 2018, it was, you know, quite frankly, the standard wasn't that good for me. The entry wasn't good enough. And now, as you go through the process, and I have entered a number of years, it improves each year, because you know what the judges are hopefully looking for, and it's the stuff that I've wrote down for somebody in my team today who's filling in the UnAwards as we speak. It's about having the strategy, the evaluation, measuring, and what the stats are. Like, if you're just doing a campaign for fun, what's the point? I mean, yes, do have some fun, but you need to show and demonstrate what you've done and what you've delivered. So it was absolutely determination to get recognised by my peers that I've done a pretty good job. And yes, we did keep entering. I think I've entered since 2017 for UnAwards, and I only won last year. So that just shows you that I am pretty determined, and I got there in the end.
Yeah, no, and I only tease. I was, you know, privately very pleased that you won. I was. I don't have favourites, but I think a lot of people were very pleased. It was a very, very deserving award for you last year. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. We've got Lindsay Coulson on the call, and I think, Lindsay, you've been involved with all sorts of awards over the years, I guess, both in terms of entering, shortlisting, and winning, probably also judging as well, I'm guessing. But yeah, what kind of your reflections and thoughts on all things award entries, and any top tips to share?
Yeah, thank you, Darren. And yes to all three of those. I've judged, I've entered in-house, and I've entered for clients as well. And so I'd say data is probably the first thing.
I can't hear anything.
Hello? Can you hear me?
It's fine.
Okay?
You everyone can hear you, Lindsay. Go for it.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so data is the first thing that I would definitely talk about. and just absolutely making sure that when you state the objective for the campaign, you then kind of close that loop, and you're really clear about how you've achieved that using data. I think that's, I can't emphasize that enough. And make sure that that's at the very top of your campaign entry in your summary. It's not like you're revealing what's happened in your campaign. Just do it, because quite often judges are time poor, and those judges, they need a little bit of help to know that this is a really important entry that they want to kind of read in a bit more detail. So I would say that is hugely important. And, it's so difficult to retrofit that data, isn't it? So I would say try and make sure that when you're building your campaign in the first place, that you're building in evaluation and measurement throughout. So it's easy to get that data. And then maybe a third point would be around just giving yourself, this is complete opposite to what Rob's just said in some respects, but give yourself that some time to do it properly. And that doesn't, that just doesn't just mean the writing, but make sure you can have time to have those conversations with the service so that you can gather that data. But also don't forget things like, which are a really nice touch, case studies, quotes from validation quotes from other people. All of those things can really add up. Just an example, if you're doing, I don't know, something like a foster care campaign, if you can have some quotes in there from somebody who's actually been impacted by that, either foster carers or the child, etc., that's going to make a huge difference. So I would just add that in as well. So yeah, just some key points it's worth people thinking about.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, useful top tips there. I suppose JP next. So you probably all know him, but if you don't, John Paul's director at Cam Digital, one of our partners again this year. So thank you for that, and to all the partners. Obviously, you've been involved a lot with the UnAwards behind the scenes, and and judged, and etc. I suppose building on kind of Lindsay's comments there, what are your thoughts and lessons learned and top tips for anybody who's looking to enter the show?
Well, I would echo, well, just say what Lindsay said was absolutely right. I've been interviewed by Lindsay for an award submission. So she was employed by a council to collate and put the award submission together, and she was ruthless and persistent in saying, like, show me the meaningful data. And there's sometimes a lot of data that isn't meaningful, and there's some that is. Having that is so important, because one of the saddest things that you can see is an award entry which is very, very long, and clearly there's been loads of energy and activity put into it, but unfortunately the outcome does not fulfill the objective. And it's really hard for an award like that, despite all the work, and you want to give them like stickers and badges and everything like that, but it can't beat an award like Rob's that comes in and it might only be 500 words, but what was the objective and what was the outcome? You can obviously exceed your outcomes and have unintended consequences as a result, but the unintended consequences can't fulfill the objective that way. So I think that's really, and from a judge's point of view, you feel for these people so much, because you can tell the energy and effort that's gone into it, but it doesn't. So the objective, the outcome, they get that bit sorted first, and then there are other bits in the middle that you can fill in. So I'd thoroughly recommend that. I think it as well, in terms of motivation to submit, everyone knows there is so much good work. I think the UnAwards is like the tip of the iceberg in terms of the great work that goes on. It's important for so many reasons, but I think one of the main reasons is your organisation will love being nominated, being recognised. And when that happens, there's a huge opportunity, particularly in December, January, February, as financial planning goes on for next year, to have a little bit more awareness of comms and what comms does and why that was particularly good, and to have an example of what good looks like, to then go and explain to the rest of the organisation, involve me earlier, bring me data, bring all things, and it too will work well. It can sometimes reposition what comms does within your organisation, and that is the reason. The articles you've written, Darren, in the MJ about comms being taken seriously. This is a wonderful little step to help everyone have a bit more clout in their organisation. The other point to make, kind of based on the previous one, is it's actually a lot easier than you think. Rob just rocks up 45 minutes before deadline. Bosh, wins. Okay, that could be in your mind if you've got the data and the objective and the outcome. You can do it, and it's much easier than you think. In the chat, and I'm sure across all social media, take the first step now, right? Don't wait to start it till later. If you start now, you're going to start seeing, you're going to start to be able to pull that data together. And Darren has sort of briefed us to design the process so that it's much easier for people. We care about your mental health, and we know how much stress is on you. Take the first step now, and it will start to prompt you to take the next steps and to build those things. And so make it easy on yourself. Get as much done as you can. I know many of you have journalistic backgrounds, and my wife is a trained journalist as well. And one of her key tips for hitting deadlines is to get the tasks out the way that you can earlier. And so taking that first step and starting now will just make it far less stressful for you. There are also wonderful things that you can do. Once you've done this, you can then recycle this award and potentially go into inferior award ceremonies in other places. But it is a process, and it's a good process to keep going. So don't hide your light under a bushel. It's easier than you think. Make sure the objective is achieved and exceeded, and make it easy for yourself by taking the first step now. Those would be my top tips. But don't worry about more is not more in these kind of things. Those two simple things, and then just to explain, as Rob is the perfect example of. But don't not start. Start now would be my recommendation.
Can I just add to that as well, JP? Since just your example, since we won the award, I now am in the senior. They've created a new corporate management team, and I get to go to the SLT meetings now. I'm on the head of the table. The article, Darren, you wrote about being at the top table. I'm there now, and I had that back in, to say, look, we know what we're doing. We are, we're in a position to, to help the organisation. And now I'm in these meetings. I mean, don't get me wrong, I wish I wasn't at these meetings now that I'm in them. They drive me mad. They're so boring. I think it's like, is this really what you do in these top meetings all day? But I'm there now. It's my own fault. But yeah, and just to, I mean, I don't want to come across saying like, oh yeah, I just put it together. That, like I say, the reason why it took me I was able to do it so quickly is because I had been working for it for a good year, 2 years, and that was about strategy, the outcomes, the objectives. It had been ingrained in me because I knew, going back to your point before, Louisa, about my previous submissions, I'd submitted Team of the Year probably every year, but looking back, I knew I didn't have that thing that you needed, and it was just exactly what JP just said. It was about just really clear objectives, what we wanted to do, how we were going to do it, and how we did it. So yeah, completely agree with all your points there, JP.
I didn't mean to undermine your brilliant work.
No, not at all.
But as you say, it's the result. It's actually the work. Yeah. You've already done the work. You've done the right stuff. Now just spend probably an hour max getting that across in a really clear way, which I'm sure you're all brilliant at.
Yeah, thanks both. I mean, there's some really valuable suggestions and tips there that I think would be very useful for people. I suppose moving across now, we've got Dan Hare on the call. Dan is from eShot, again, one of this year's UnAwards partners. So thanks very much, Dan, for your support. And obviously you've been involved in awards for a while now. And I suppose just some of your thoughts and kind of top tips that you can share with people on the call today, Dan.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, hi everyone. Yes, new to the UnAwards, be the first time I've judged this, but certainly not new to awards in the more general sense, both winning them and judging them with various hats on. And yeah, at the risk of just echoing what's already been said, I think in terms of a key takeaway from what we've talked about today, begin with the end in mind. So your campaign likely had an objective. What was that objective? Tell us. You need to tell us the story, but certainly from my own perspective, I'd be expecting to see the results. And I think I'm judging the email category in particular, which is kind of our specialist subject. If you read the categories, it says there in the description of that one to explain how you delivered real benefits and positive outcomes. So just to give you a steer, we are looking for those real world outcomes. How did you manage to improve recycling, get more foster carers, help with the cost of living crisis and what have you, not just how I've got a nice vanity metric of an open rate or something like that. So I think, back to those earlier points, but, as I say, bigger in the own mind. The other thing is obviously just in practical terms, we've talked to a few award winners here today. I'm sure they can help you a little bit more. If you look on the website, there is a page with the winners from 2022 with some of the judges' comments. So that's well worth a read to give you a few tips as to how others have been judged in the past. But yeah, as JP says, you've probably already done the work to win it. It's now just a case of explaining to the rest of us how you went about doing it.
That's really, really useful, Dan. Thank you. We've got another couple of judges at least on the call, and then I think we're going to open it up for questions. But yeah, we've got Alan and James from Alive with Ideas, and again, been long-term partners of the UnAwards and have helped so much. And you'll notice there's some fancy graphics this year, far better than the tut that I've churned out over the years, and we can thank Alan and James for those, and they've really professionalized me, so thank you very much for that. But yeah, you've obviously spent a lot of time looking at UnAward entries amongst other things as well, but yeah, I suppose any reflections, anything that hasn't been covered so far in terms of top tips and lessons learned and things that you would impart on those looking to enter this year?
Difficult to pick out the things that haven't been said because there's been so much great stuff has been covered already, I guess. I think the point that I kept coming back to is, it's about doing great work. And whilst we can talk about getting entries turned around in next to no time, I think several people have already picked up on the fact that you've got to have that foundation of a great piece of work already in place that's going to have strategy, clear objectives, it's been measured, it's creative, and you've got the data and the proof and the stories to back it all up. But we might not need to know everything that you went through to get to that process, to get to that end point. We don't necessarily need to know the trials and tribulations and the fights that you had on to get that campaign across the line. I think it is, as a couple of people have said already, telling it simply and concisely, because we don't want to come across as woe as me as judges, but we've had 50 entries in one category one year, I remember, and there's only so much you can take on board, I guess. So that telling it concisely is really, really important. James, do you want to come in on anything?
Yeah, I think, I would totally agree with all of that. And Rob's 500-word entry. Yeah, I think that's I think that's a great example. Just everything that you would do with any other bit of sort of really concise, copy that you're trying to draw attention to certain things, bullet points, breaking things up with headings, like drawing attention to the really, really important stuff. Everything that you would do in your day-to-day role, do it for your reward entry, because you're doing exactly the same thing. You're drawing our attention to the most important things. I think, the most sort of the saddest thing that I think could happen with an award entry, which I think is what JP touched on, is there being a nugget of gold right in the middle of a massive 500-word bit of text that we might miss when we're sort of going through lots of different entries, because you're trying to read so much and nobody wants to miss that nugget of gold that might make your campaign the winner. Just get it up there in the middle of everything, right at the top, and just draw attention to it.
It's a great point, that, James, and I think it reminds me, actually, there was some other industry awards I was involved in judging last year, and there was a particular campaign that I absolutely loved, and the visuals were great, and it really seemed to have huge impact in terms of the visual. But I really struggled to find the difference that it had made, and the kind of, you know, the cynical chief exec so what question. And I really wanted to choose it as my winner, but I just couldn't, because there was just some missing information. It's such a shame, and it might have been that it was rushed, or maybe the objectives or the evaluation had just fallen a little bit short. But it's so important. It's the creative element is huge, but it does need to be backed up by some of the data, doesn't it?
I think there's an interesting thing on the creative side of things as well, from our perspective when we're judging those, because I think there's been a couple of entries over the years where I think people have thought that they're going to win it because they've employed an agency to do some nice design work, right? And you know, I'm all in favour of that. Don't get me wrong. But that doesn't necessarily make it a creative campaign in its approach and its strategy and its the way in which it went about things. You know, there's other ways in which you can be creative on next to no budget and do things interestingly, that we look for a broader perspective, particularly when it comes to the creative award, on how we define that. So I think there was a winner a few years back that you know, the execution wasn't the most glamorous of thing, but their approach to it, how they went about the campaign, we felt was really took a different approach. And what was really interesting about this particular campaign was because the entry was really well structured and it was informed, and their channels and their approach was informed by data, it almost felt so logical that you could miss the fact that they'd done something really interesting. So it just took us a moment to reflect on what they'd done and thought, yeah, it all makes sense, it all adds up. But they really informed their approach, their data, their use of influencers, I think it was in this particular instance, and how they executed that campaign out in the community. The design side of things was a little bit, you know, thrown together, but that's fine. It done the job that it needed to do. So yeah, it's just thinking about things from a slightly different perspective as well when it comes to creativity.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, Alan. A couple of questions have popped into the chat. First off, we've got Stephen. Hi, Stephen. What's the best way to submit or incorporate creative assets and visuals into our entry? I think what we tend to say is we ask you to limit it to kind of one attachment, really just building on what Alan's just said. You know, in some categories, you'll get 30, 40, even 50 entries. And it's just impossible to just, you know, view. If everybody had sort of 5 or 6 attachments, you're into, you know, over 100 documents to look at, and it's just a bit too much. We try and limit it to, you know, your absolute best one. You know, you put in the best visual asset that you can. You can include links in your entry, of course, to go and have a look at, you know, whether it's a website or a video on YouTube, whatever it might be. You can absolutely do that, so you can embed that into the copy of your entries. But again, I build upon, you know, Rob's points and others, which is keep it simple. You know, what's the thing that really does make your piece of work sing, and choose that as your one attachment, I would say.
Yeah. I remember, sorry Darren, I remember one of the submissions one year where they spent quite a lot of money on the campaign that they put together, and I think they showed us every asset that was created. It was like, I don't know how many versions of the same bit of artwork for different banners and bits and pieces. Actually, it became detracted, I would say, from the entry, because we were kind of like, well, yeah, we get it, we've seen it once. It kind of, yeah, in some ways took something away rather than adding something.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, really helpful. We've got a question from Hannah. Hi Hannah, hope you're good. What are you looking for in terms of best team, a spread of work delivered, or just a focus on one thing or a campaign? And I suppose on that, just to say really quickly, there is best small team, which is obviously the category Rob won. So for best small team, it's teams of 3 or less in terms of team numbers there. There is also a best comms team, which is kind of any size team. That was won by Staffordshire County Council last year. That one's a public vote, so that's very much about putting as much information as you can, and then we'll publish that on the website, and then that's that's up to the public vote, you know. So the public gets what the public wants. I think the Jam sung that, didn't they? I think I'm right in getting that lyric associated to the Jam. But yeah, for best small team, I mean, obviously, as Rob said earlier, a lot of it was based upon having a brilliant comms strategy, which I'd seen separately, hadn't I, actually, Rob? And it really was. And I think it just gave a really strong foundation to then a really creative entry. We're going to open it up for questions in a sec. So think of your questions and either drop them into the chat or raise your hand, because it'd be great to hear from you as well. But just quickly before we do that, we've also got we've got a new sponsor this year, Dominic Ridley-Moy from the Behaviour Change Network. So thanks so much, Dominic. Just interested in your thoughts, Dominic, just in terms of what you've heard so far, but anything else to hear, because obviously you're experienced in the world of awards, and any other thoughts and practical tips that you can add to the mix?
You've put me on the spot now. I mean,
Sorry.
I think it's no, it's okay. It's okay. It's I think for me, it's kind of, I think with an award entry as well, the other thing that I'd say is, in some ways, you're kind of telling a bit of a story, a bit of a narrative, and it's that kind of, if you've written a well-crafted story that takes you on the journey, kind of from beginning through to end, so you get kind of what the problem was, how you solved it, what you wanted to achieve, and then actually if you achieved what you wanted to achieve and how you exceeded it, those kinds of things for me, and then those kind of 3 bullet points at the top. So it's that, as everyone else has said, if you look at those first 3 kind of bullet points at the top, there's that in of itself make you think, oh, I think this could win. And if it doesn't, then you're probably missing a trick. And then have that sort of that story running through that, probably, I suppose, golden thread that gives you a bit of a structure to it. And I think that makes sense, because I've read award entries where it's kind of been, the stuff's there, but because it's a bit meandering, it doesn't come across as well. So yes, always get a comms person to write your awards as well.
Yeah, there's another top
which shouldn't
tip.
be too difficult for this one, hopefully.
Hopefully not. That's really helpful. Thanks, Dominic. Should we open it up for thoughts and questions from others on the call today now? So either drop it into the chat or just raise a hand, and it would be lovely to hear from some of you as well, and just introduce yourself and yeah, share it with thoughts or questions. So yeah, just raise a hand and we'll get you to speak. Yeah, John Paul.
I'd like to ask the other judges and anyone that's ever judged an awards here, it's like, what has been the best entry you've ever read or experienced? What has really stood out for you in terms of tone or what was included, to give some people some additional tips other than the great ones before now?
Wish I'd thought of that question. Really good one. Yeah. Yeah, Alan and James, putting you on the spot again.
Yeah, now who's being put on the spot? Do you know what? Weirdly enough, when the first thing that popped into my head was one from last year, and it wasn't a winner. It was a highly commended in the end. But I think it stuck in my head just because of the way they told the story so well and made it so relevant to their area. It was a local authority in their area, and why it was so important to their area, and why the outcome, or the objective of this campaign was so important. And I think that just covers all the things we've talked about, and it really sticks in my head for that reason, that it just really sort of it just really told a really strong story and made it really relevant, why it was so important to their area.
Yeah, really helpful. Thanks, James. Alan, anything else to add? Yeah,
it's difficult to sort of build on all of the things that have been said before. There was a particular entry which I was kind of referencing as I was speaking. I can't remember which local authority it was, but it's just one of those that they told the story really well, gave us the evidence that it had the impact. They'd applied, creative approach to what they'd done. It was just robust. You couldn't pick it apart. And that's something that you kind of think, have you, we've seen entries where someone has clearly just thought, I'm going to give it a punt. And yeah, we've done something quite cool. Here's what it is. I don't know who it was and if they're on the call, but there was always one that sticks in my mind that didn't win, but I loved it because it was poo bags in trees. And I don't know, Rob, was that you?
Yeah,
It was. Yeah, I had a feeling it might be. It was brilliant.
Poo bags in trees.
Loads of gaps in it, but it was I just always sort of remember
thanks.
it as a no, but I think we spoke about it before actually at another event. But the fact that how long ago was that?
Oh yeah, it's a while ago. Yeah.
Still
but
sticks in my mind.
It was a good example of I knew it was good, but it had no object. It was a good idea, and it did it, but you know, looking back, I hadn't planned it. It didn't have any objective. It was just luck. You know, I put it forward because visually it was just crazy. But look, if I was to put that submission in now, I wouldn't have. This is the way I've changed in that I wouldn't have just gone out and put poo bags on trees. I would have gone to the wardens, right? What's your objective? And they said, look, we're trying to reduce, you know, the number of dog fouling incidents and whatever. Okay, well, what's your problem? Okay, so what's the data now? And you know, how do you want to reduce it by? How are we going to measure it? And that's how I'll do it today, because I'm, like I said, in the last year or so, I've got to the point where I'm trying to get better at this. And whilst that one was brilliant, it could have been even better if I'd have been, you know, if I'd have planned it better and if I'd have, you know, used some proper stats in there. So yeah, but it was funny. It was funny. The look on people's faces when they were just walking past, because they all thought it was just loads of dog poo in the middle of a high street. It was insane.
Well, it happens, doesn't it? That's why it worked, I suppose, and stuck in my mind. But I think that's it's that robust entry, isn't it, where you know you've got all of the bases covered from the data perspective, the story, the qualitative and quantitative data that sort of backs up the work that's been done. Yeah, sorry, Rob, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus.
No, that's fine. Took a dog poo bag at me. It's all right.
No, that's really interesting. We've got a question in the chat from Sophia. Hi, Sophia. Just picking on something that John Paul mentioned about making sure the campaign outcome fulfills the objective. I wondered if a campaign would be eligible if it makes a positive difference and progress in terms of the qualitative data, but hasn't necessarily achieved the initial objectives in terms of the quantitative data. It's a really good question, because sometimes with campaigns, I mean, you know, a campaign could be a day, couldn't it? Or a campaign could be 3 years. I mean, campaigns come in all different shapes and sizes, don't they? And sometimes, very often, we do get the hospital pass from a service area where they don't really have any data, and we're working in a kind of almost make it up as we go along, and that's not ideal. We obviously always want to push back to the service areas and say, look, you must have something. We need to be smart in terms of our objectives. But sometimes we are starting with, you know, very poor data. I mean, I would say, yeah, we always want to go back and push service areas where we can. Sometimes that isn't always possible, though. And I would say if it's a great piece of work that has so far done positive things, but there's still more to come, absolutely it can be entered, and it might be something then that you follow up and enter again next year. But I would say give it a whirl. And I think the other thing to add to that is, I think one of the beauty of the form that John Paul and Mark at Can Digital have created now is, with one entry form you can enter 4, 5, 6, 7 categories. So you might enter best creative, best use of data, best low cost comms. You can put in for all sorts, and I think I would absolutely urge people to do that. Very often it's the category that you thought was weaker that you end up getting shortlisted in, and the one that you thought you was nailed on for, you don't. And you know, that's in the lap of the gods. You know, some of this stuff is subjective, and it is down to the judges ultimately to pick and choose. But I would say, Sophia, get it in there, give it a go. I think Sophia's come back and said, yeah, objectives were clear in the first place, and I backed up by a behaviour change intervention, but a tough egg to crack. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're doing all the right things, and Dominic will be nodding there about the behaviour change intervention. So you're doing all the right things, clearly. So I would say give it a go. give it a go. You know, it's half an hour, 40 minutes of a lunch break, or ideally during the working day. Give it a go. I mean, there's nothing to be lost, I would say, Sophia. Alan, I think's got a hand up.
Oh, sorry, go for it, Alan.
Yeah. I was just going to say that point on the different types of data. I guess it comes down to what the other entries are doing a little bit, because if they've nailed both aspects of the data, the qualitative and the quantitative, then naturally that might be favoured over the other. It's difficult to say, isn't it? It'll be the context of the other entries as well. So I suppose, Darren, to your point, is get that entry in, because you're not going to win if you don't enter. So that's almost the most important part that we possibly haven't covered off.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Alan. Thank you. We've got Jill Spur on the call. I'm admiring your background, Jill, with the "together we make it possible," and that's so apt, isn't it, for kind of where we are currently, and particularly the UnAwards and this call. You've won awards before, and you do brilliant work. I'm just wondering if you've got, and again, sorry putting you on the spot, just wondering if you've got any thoughts or insights and top tips or lessons learned from previous years gone by.
So I'm currently in a team that isn't award winning yet. It is my intention to do that, but in the previous two teams, one of which happened to be Louisa's, and the team I was in before that, we also won awards. I think for me, it's part of evaluating your work is recognizing what makes a good entry. And a good entry isn't just about doing the run-of-the-mill really, really well. It could be, depending on the entry, but the thing that I want to get from awards is I want to look at somebody's entry and go, I get why you got that, and I want your ideas, I want your best practice. And I think, and I actually go back all the way, I won a few Newspaper Society awards before I was in communications. And back in the day, I don't know any of you who were in journalism who used to do the old NS Awards, and used to get a big wodge of all the entries and all the good ideas. So at the time I was in advertising, we could go through and go, oh, that's a really good feature, that'll work here. And that to me is what the awards is about. Yes, it's absolutely about rewarding your team and everything, but it's also looking at best practice and what you can take from what somebody else has done and apply it in your area. So, like the things that we won at the Royal Borough, they're not going to happen for a while, and they don't apply to everywhere, but you will have a complex, sensitive event happen at some stage. So what can you take from the planning that Louisa did, and the relationship building that we all did, and the planning and the rollout and everything, to work with something that you've got complicated? And that to me is the absolute beauty of awards. Is that what you wanted, Dar?
That was almost like, if you've just done that off pat, you haven't rehearsed.
No.
It's very impressive.
Brilliant.
Yeah, wish I could be like that.
Oh, do I deserve an award?
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, JP.
Exactly what Jill said. The point of going for this, obviously you're aiming for the win, absolutely, but there are many positive things that happen from entering even when you don't. Like, many of the people on this call have said, the mental process of doing it, what you then need to go and ask services for, saying that you've entered and not won, and here's why, and therefore here's what I need next time in order to win, is exactly what we've done on a foster care project recently. It was a runner-up last time, but there wasn't the outcomes data. So we then went back to everyone and said, we're going to need your outcomes data because we're going for this award this time. And it has created the right behaviour as a result of it. So winning must obviously be your objective, but it is a good process, and there are wonderful things that happen over a period of years by having the habit of entering awards as part of what you do when you plan them.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thanks, JP. And I think John Paul's put into the chat actually the link to comms files, and we were having this chat. There was a heads of comms kind of network event in Borough on Wednesday, and one of the points that I made there was actually that when we start some of this work, we shouldn't start from scratch with things. There's so much good stuff out there that's free to access. In terms of great resources, you know, on, you know, eShot and Dominic's site and a Life of Ideas have got so many resources and sources of inspiration. Same with John Paul and Mark at CAN. Do have a look at that. Comms Files in particular, it's a link on the homepage of the Comms 2.0 website. There's over 500 unaward entries from previous years in there to kind of give you some top tips and some clues about what's gone before. So I think, you know, we're very lucky in the public sector, aren't we, that we do have access to all of this stuff for free and, you know, do make use of that. I suppose the other thing to mention, this is kind of to Caitlin's question in the chat, actually, where if you are finding the data element tricky, I mean, that is true sometimes. Sometimes we just don't have good data and insights, do we? When the judges go through the entries themselves, there are effectively each entry scored out of 50. And there are 5 separate elements that get scored and each one gets 10 points. The final one, which also gets 10 points, is just around creativity. And it's because sometimes the creativity can go a long way. Yes, sometimes you don't have the best foundations and you don't have the best insights and data. So actually, there is a slight get out of jail clause in there that you can score really, really highly in the creativity category there and get, you know, 10 out of 10. Whereas, you know, your objective setting and the evaluation might score a little bit less, not necessarily your fault, but you're just working with slightly less robust data than you'd like. So I think, you know, do bear that in mind. Creativity is just as importantly scored as you know, elements of data and how you use evaluation. So yeah, if you haven't got all the data in the world, don't let it deter you, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. Point from Lindsay there. Totally agree with JP. Get the campaign evaluation right and you'll have the information you need for your award. So yeah, always helps, doesn't it? I think JP's point's an important one, that get started now. You know, we've all done it. You know, I've done award entries on a Saturday afternoon and been moaned at because, you know, I should be doing something family orientated. Try not to do that. Try and do it during the working week. You know, even just 20 minutes, you know, with a coffee, you know, just during one of your rare breaks in between Teams meetings, just make a start, just put pen to paper and just flesh out what might go into it. Each section of the form. You can go back and revisit it. It's easy to do that. But I think, yeah, as much as you can get upstream and do a little bit, you know, in the week or two before, it has to help. Anybody else got any thoughts or questions or reflections? Just shout or raise a hand. It'd be great to hear from more of you before we let you loose on the weekend. Louisa there, I agree with that. We've already started our entries. I think we've already had one from Reading today, I think, actually, Louisa. That might be news to you, but JP...
Is the royal member of the family, there's another royal died.
In Reading.
In Reading? No, we don't have any royalty in Reading. So I've got to rely on proper campaigns now, like proper comms work. I don't think. Well, anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We're entering a few, so.
Yeah.
And I do know that we've entered one already, Darren. There's 3 that I've reviewed today.
Fantastic. No, I love it. No, thank you. I suppose the other thing to bear in mind is don't forget about the Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll embarrass Louisa again, but you know, Louisa's won that last year.
No, I didn't win it.
Which one did you win?
I won Comms Professional.
Comms Professional. Sorry. Yes.
That's one of these.
Lifetime Achievement this year.
No, I haven't done anything amazing this year. So
the reason I say that and I got confused is one year we did have a particularly young Lifetime Achievement winner, and you don't have to be old and grey and grizzled like me to be in with a shout. You know, 10 years working in comms is a lifetime, isn't it? Let's be honest. So, you know, don't think that somebody has to be as old as me to enter or to be nominated. If someone's done great things that have made a difference to the sector, then absolutely they should be considered. But seriously though, it's a really lovely thing to nominate someone that has done great things. So do think about, you know, who do you like, who do you respect in the industry, who could you put forward for the Lifetime Achievement Award this year. You know, there's only ever been 7, so it's a very special select band of people, and being vain, I would have loved it back in the day, but I can't have it, obviously. I think it's a very special thing and a lovely thing to be shortlisted for. So if you know somebody that you think's deserving, do put them in. The entry form for that, kind of ignore it. Just go for the final section and just do your 200 or 300 or 400 words just to capture why you think that person should win the UnAward for lifetime achievement, because I think it's a really special thing. And we announced that it's the last one to get announced on the big day, and I think it's a very special thing. Of course, thank you, Sadie. It was Eddie Coates Madden last year, who actually, interesting stat, was only the second man ever to win it. So we have 5 female winners so far and 2 males. And so let's see if we can get another female winner this year. Even things back up and go 6-2 into the lead. So yeah, seriously, if you've got people that you really respect and who you think are deserving, do enter them and nominate them.
And
Any
the
more?
teams one as well. Sorry, the teams one as well. You may not have the whiz bang award, but the team works well and it has good values and it has good orientation, good structure, all those sort of things. If you're lucky enough to be in one of those teams, but you maybe don't have the piece of work that's either ready now or was ready this year, enter the team.
Absolutely, and again, that is a public vote, so it's very much it's very much up to the public who gets to choose the winners on that. And I love that element, and I love watching the public votes come in, and I keep checking every half an hour to see who's winning. Yeah, Rob's got a hand up.
Now, I probably have the most important question of the whole event. What film are you going to show this year?
Do you know the funny thing? It's funny. I can't tell anyone.
I do.
Famously,
I just thought I'd try it.
I know. Famously, only myself and the venue manager know. I've actually had to pay some money to the venue today, so it's definitely happening this year. Just in case you're wondering, and I've put in a request for a film. The funny thing is, some films are really, really cheap to show, and some films are really, really expensive to show, and it doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily based on kind of how many people have watched it, across the globe. It's not about that. It's down to the distributors and how much they charge. So I have put in a request for a film today, and I'm waiting to hear back how many thousands of pounds it might cost.
I'm sure it'll be great.
So yeah, so I can't tell you, Rob, but without giving too much away, I think you'd like it.
Excellent. Okay, great.
I like the fact that you've given us no clue at all, but still teased us with the fact that you've done it. I feel like you're playing games with us, Darren.
No, it's it's always the hardest thing I have to do. Choosing a film for 140 people is the most difficult task, and you don't always get it right. I thought I'd struck gold when I picked Pulp Fiction that year, but a couple of people afterwards said, "Oh, it was a bit too sweary for me." So it's really hard. You can't pick something that's perfect for everyone. Is my top tick. Louise Raymond. I met Louisa on Wednesday, and she told me off in my monthly film reviews. I'd said how brilliant John Wick 4 was, and so she's disagreed with me furiously. So sorry about that, Louise. No, it won't be John Wick, because I think that might be. I'm not actually into action films normally, but the John Wick films are brilliant. And it all started with the killing of a puppy, for those that haven't watched it. So I think you should give it a go this weekend, Louise.
You know what? I just might, Darren. If I find myself at loose end, I might give it a go. Because then I can't really complain about it, can I, unless I've watched it.
Yeah, give it a go. It might surprise.
I might do it while I'm applying for the UnAwards.
Do you know what a brilliant suggestion? If I'd been quicker off the mark, I'd have suggested that. Yeah, watch the first John Wick film whilst entering the best behaviour change or best use of data category. We're now getting film requests coming in.
with all 4, you could probably do about 12 entries. If you did a marathon. Yeah.
3 each. Yeah. Hannah's got to go. Thanks so much, Hannah. And mindful that we have, I think we've overrun on time, haven't we? But yeah, we're happy to stay on the call. A couple of people who will remain nameless suggested that we had an alcoholic beverage whilst this little soiree was taking place. I mean, I haven't got one, but looks like John Paul, have you got one?
I had one.
You had one.
I've completed
Past
it.
tense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I bought one to keep JP company
breakfast.
because I didn't want him to feel like he hadn't got any company.
That's so good of you, Dominic. That's really helpful. Sophia's got to go. Great to see you. Thanks so much for taking part. Hope it's been helpful, and good luck with all those entries. Yeah. Anybody else about to have a drink? John Paul again.
Well,
Rob.
I wasn't, but I am now.
Has anybody still got work to do other than the entries? Yeah, Rob, Stephen, Neil. Yeah, a few of you. Sadie.
Definitely.
Sadie and Neil, are you just saying that because Dan's on the call?
Yes. No, I actually do have work to do.
Thanks so much to Jill. Jill's got to leave us. Dinner in Oxford awaits. Have a lovely time, Jill. We'll see you soon. Take care. Yeah, Lindsay's got to go. Lindsay, thanks for taking the time. Rose from Staffordshire, get those entries in. Staffordshire were double winners last year. See if you can repeat it this year. And Rose is doing some brilliant work. Wrote a brilliant blog post for the website this week, by the way. So have a look at that, which was an in-person event that did great things around climate change. So do take a look at that. Louise, great to see you. Sorry again about talking about gout and John Wick. I apologise. James, definitely the worst reason for leaving. Where's it gone? Yeah, kids swimming lesson. Oh, I remember those days. That's why you haven't had a drink yet. Good luck, James. Nice to see you. So, should we wrap it up there, folks? It's been brilliant seeing you all. If you've got more questions, just give me a shout. Drop me an email through. Closing date is 2 weeks on Monday, so it's the 30th of October. It won't be extended. Do get in there, and good luck to everybody, and may the best people win. So go and have a lovely weekend. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks to the winners, previous winners. Thanks to all of our sponsors and partners. Been lovely seeing you, and I'm glad it wasn't just me, and that lots of people turned up. That was nice. So thanks all. So thanks everyone.
Darren. Thank you.
Go have a brilliant weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Bye,
Cheers,
everyone.
everyone.
So,
See ya.
bye.
Cheers.
Take
Bye.
care.
See you later.
Bye.